The larvae, born from the eggs of blowflies, have one goal: to find a host to infest. These tiny creatures are relentless in their search, and unfortunately, this poor little squirrel became their victim. Its body was infested with numerous large, horrific lesions, which were the result of the larvae burrowing into its skin, feeding off its blood and nutrients. The squirrel must have endured unbearable pain and itching as it tried to go about its life. The open wounds were not only deeply uncomfortable, but also signs of serious infection that were spreading quickly throughout its small body. The larvae, which thrived by consuming the squirrel's blood and bodily fluids, were growing rapidly, making the situation even more dire. One fateful day, while the squirrel was foraging for food in the wild, a kind-hearted man happened upon it. He couldn't bear to see the poor creature struggling with its painful, infected body. The squirrel's desperate state, covered in gruesome, infected sores, caught the man's attention immediately. Without hesitation, the man decided to intervene. His heart filled with compassion, and he carefully approached the squirrel, who was weakened and vulnerable, searching for food with little strength left. The man gently coaxed the squirrel into his care, and he quickly transported it back to his home. There, he set about the difficult task of helping the little creature. He took great care in tending to its wounds, using tweezers to carefully extract each larva from the squirrel's body. These parasitic larvae, having grown large from feeding on the squirrel's life force, were deeply embedded in its flesh, making the removal process slow and painstaking. The man worked with incredible patience, knowing that each larva he removed was one step closer to relieving the squirrel's suffering. Every larva he removed had been sucking the squirrel's blood and draining its energy, which had left the squirrel weak and vulnerable. This wasn't a simple task, and at times, it must have been emotionally difficult for the man to see the suffering of the small creature. However, he persevered, making sure to treat the squirrel with the utmost care and gentleness. Day by day, the little squirrel's condition improved. The open sores slowly began to heal, its fur started to regrow, and its strength gradually returned. The process of healing was not quick, but the man's dedication paid off. Finally, after days of careful treatment and attention, the squirrel had recovered enough to return to the wild. The man, having saved the squirrel from the grips of death and given it a second chance at life, carefully placed it back in its natural habitat. It was a bittersweet moment as the man watched the squirrel scamper off into the forest, free from the torment of the parasites that once plagued it. This small act of kindness gave the squirrel the opportunity to live its life once again, this time free from pain and suffering. The man's compassion and care had restored its health, and now it was free to continue its journey through the forest. While the future for the squirrel might still be full of dangers and challenges, there was hope that it would live a long, healthy, and happy life. It had been given a second chance, thanks to the kindness of one human who refused to let it suffer. And that, in itself, was a beautiful reminder of the power of compassion in the world. A group of volunteers recently carried out a compassionate and heroic rescue operation, saving a small squirrel that had been severely infested by larvae. The poor squirrel was found wandering in a remote forest, desperately searching for food, but its body was covered in numerous large and small holes caused by the larvae. These wounds not only caused immense pain, but had also left the squirrel weak and suffering. The larvae had burrowed deep into the squirrel's skin for quite some time, breeding and growing inside, causing severe malnutrition and skin infections. The sight of the squirrel in such a distressed condition moved the volunteers deeply, but they knew they had to act quickly to save its life. With unwavering dedication and patience, the volunteers prepared a set of specialized medical tools and began their work of rescuing the squirrel. They gently used a small pair of tweezers, carefully extracting each larvae from the squirrel's body. Every larvae removed felt like a small victory, but the process was far from easy. The larvae had embedded deeply into the skin and were tightly attached to the tissue, so each extraction required the utmost caution to avoid causing any further harm to the already fragile squirrel. Time passed in silence, with only the soft sounds of the volunteers' breathing and the occasional rustle from the squirrel, as if it sensed the care being provided. Once all the larvae had been removed, the volunteers proceeded to clean the wounds. They meticulously washed each wound, disinfected the area, and carefully bandaged the affected spots. Though the squirrel's condition remained quite serious, the volunteers did not lose hope. They knew that with proper care and a bit of luck,
这些不是它随身携带的食物，而是寄生在它身体上的副营养，每天吸食着宿主的营养。而动物们拿它根本没有办法。那么松鼠是怎么被盯上的呢？成年的夫蝇在树枝上，松鼠经过的时候，小小的白色幼虫就会出来，通过嘴巴肛门或者鼻子处进入，最后到皮肤下定居，靠吃竭力。
They were a testament to kindness and responsibility toward wildlife. They understood that every creature, no matter how small or vulnerable, deserves the right to live and heal. Their selfless efforts not only saved a life, but also sent a powerful message about protecting wild animals and preserving nature. In saving this squirrel, the volunteers reaffirmed that small, compassionate acts can make a profound difference in the lives of creatures in need of help. The rescue was not only a triumph for the squirrel, but also a powerful reminder of the importance of wildlife conservation and the impact of human kindness on the natural world. One kind-hearted man, while taking a stroll along a familiar path in the forest, happened to notice something was wrong with a little squirrel. As he got closer, he saw strange signs on its body, large sores beginning to appear on its back and chest, which seemed to indicate that something dangerous was threatening the squirrel. These wounds weren't from a simple accident, but appeared to be the result of some small creatures invading and growing inside its body. This not only weakened the squirrel, but also caused it to become lethargic and lifeless. In particular, the sores had spread to its neck and groin area, where the attack was more severe from the tiny creatures that were feeding on the squirrel's nutrients. Additionally, one of the most noticeable signs was that the squirrel's fur was beginning to fall out in patches, revealing the open sores underneath. The fur loss wasn't a natural occurrence, but rather the result of the creatures burrowing into the squirrel's skin, destroying tissue and making the squirrel weaker and more vulnerable. Seeing the squirrel in such distress, the kind man could not just stand by and watch it suffer. He decided to take the squirrel immediately to a nearby veterinarian, hoping for a chance to save it. At the clinic, after an examination, the vet quickly identified that the small creatures inside the squirrel were the cause of these severe wounds. With skilled hands, the vet performed a minor surgery to remove all the creatures and clean the sores. Once the parasites were removed, the squirrel immediately began to feel a bit better. However, the wounds were still present, so the vet carefully disinfected them to prevent infection and advised the man to give special care to the squirrel in the following days. With continuous attention, the squirrel gradually began to recover. While the wounds on its body were still visible, they slowly started healing. The man kept a close watch on the squirrel's condition, ensuring it had plenty of rest and nourishment to fully regain its strength. It was hoped that, in a short time, the squirrel's thick, beautiful fur would grow back, and the sores would only be a memory of a battle it had survived. Thanks to the love, care, and patience shown by the man, the little squirrel would soon return to its joyful, free life in the wild, where it could live happily once again. The squirrel's condition worsened as it scratched and bit the affected areas. This behavior only aggravated the situation, as it failed to alleviate the intense itching caused by the larvae, and, instead, caused the wounds to become even more severe. Infected squirrels may act erratically due to the intense discomfort, as the larvae cause extreme itching. Despite the pain and suffering, squirrels are often able to recover because the buffalo fly larvae depend on the survival of their host throughout their life cycle. If the host dies, the larvae cannot continue to develop. In this particular case, when the squirrel's condition was discovered, a kind-hearted person quickly took action to help. The person carefully removed the larvae using small tweezers and pliers. These larvae are incredibly stubborn and firmly attached to the squirrel's skin, making the removal process difficult. It took a considerable amount of time and patience to carefully extract each larva. However, after some effort, all the larvae were eventually removed. Once the squirrel had been freed from the larvae, it was given food and clean water to help support its recovery. This was crucial, as proper nutrition and hydration are key to rebuilding the squirrel's strength after suffering from the parasitic infestation. The provision of food and water helped the squirrel regain its energy and begin to heal. However, it's important to note that capturing and trying to treat wild squirrels can often cause additional stress and harm. This added strain can sometimes complicate the recovery process, so great care must be taken during the treatment to avoid further distress. Hopefully, after these efforts to help, the squirrel will fully recover and be able to return to its natural life in the wild, free from the torment of the parasites that once plagued it. While there are risks in handling wild animals, the care and compassion shown in this instance gave the squirrel a second chance at life. The little squirrel was found in an alarming condition, suffering from severe skin inflammation that covered much of its body. The most distressing sight was the large gaping sores that covered its fur. These weren't just simple wounds. They were deep, open holes that housed hundreds of parasitic larvae. These larvae clung stubbornly to the squirrel's skin, feeding off its blood and bodily fluids. They drained its energy and nutrients, weakening the squirrel to the point where its survival seemed uncertain. The larvae thrived rapidly, multiplying at a fast pace, which only added to the gravity of the situation. If the squirrel hadn't been discovered and treated immediately, it's doubtful that it would have lasted much longer. Fortunately, the quick actions of the rescuers made all the difference. Once it was located, skilled caregivers acted swiftly but carefully to remove the parasitic larvae. The process was delicate, as the squirrel was in a fragile state, and they took great care not to cause any additional damage to its already compromised skin. Each larvae was carefully extracted, ensuring minimal stress on the squirrel's weakened body. The treatment required expertise and precision, as the rescuers knew that any misstep could lead to further complications. In the days that followed, the squirrel was given the medical care it needed. It was treated with gentle care, its wounds cleaned, and its body nourished to regain strength. Slowly but surely, the squirrel began to recover. Its fur started to grow back, and the open sores began to heal. The inflammation in its skin subsided, and it regained its strength as the days went by. The care and attention it received from the rescuers allowed it to bounce back and return to its natural state of health. Once the squirrel was fully recovered and strong enough to survive in the wild again, it was carefully released back into its natural habitat. The moment it was set free, the squirrel scurried away into the familiar trees, its home in the wild, where it could forage for food and live freely once more. This heartwarming story is a testament to the resilience of wildlife and the power of human compassion. It also highlights the importance of early intervention and the impact that dedicated individuals can have on the life of an animal in need. The squirrel, once a victim of a terrible parasitic infection, now had the chance to live out the rest of its life in the wild, thanks to the kindness and care of those who helped it recover.